Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk Astrology. In today's episode, we'll be talking about rectification and why it is so important for astrologers to have accurate birth information. Joining us today, we have esteemed astrologer, author, and lecturer Carol Tebbs. Carol has served the astrological community for over 50 years, has served as Kepler's president, served 3 terms as ESO's president, and is a co-founder of UAC. So thank you so much, Carol, for joining us again today. And how are you doing?
Great to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming on again. It's always a pleasure. And on a personal note, Carol is one of my favorite astrologers who has taught me so much at KeplerCollege. So talking about rectification today and the importance of astrologers to have accurate birth time and accurate birth information. Why is it important to have accurate birth times?
Well, it is important if you're doing forecasting for clients. I have never had a client who just came for a reading just for fun. Oh, I'm just going to play with this. No, they have something on their mind.
Right.
And indeed, by looking at the chart and seeing what's activated by movement, you can make a forecast. Now, many people do not have a birth time. They don't, many countries do not record birth time at all. And so, yeah, I was born on September 1st, 1952, for instance. And possibly they can tell me, oh, before sunrise, maybe. Sometime, it was dark out, but it was into the new day. Sometime in the morning. I mean, you're talking about 6 hours at least. And if it's during the winter, it could be 7 or 8 hours, depending on the location.
Absolutely.
And if you're up in Alaska, it might be 12 hours, or the most part of the day. After breakfast, okay, that, when do you normally eat breakfast? That's not precise enough to forecast. Now, 6:18 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Seattle, Washington, I can work with that.
Right.
Yes. But the other people who are referred to me, I mean, the other astrologers know I do rectification. I will tell students this right at the beginning. It's an important tool. And you need to be good in your movement techniques, assuming you already know your fundamentals, your basic techniques. But the movement techniques, particularly transits, secondary progressions, solar directions, and you can do a solar return, whatever. You need to have a toolkit of half a dozen things that you test. So why does the astrologer need birth time? Well, William Holden gives this brief description of what it is. Rectification is the art of aligning real life events with appropriate astrological descriptors. And the reason is to validate the natal chart, and most important, to ensure reliable forecasting for the client. Now, as astrologers know if you don't have birth time at all, you don't have houses and you don't have angles.
Absolutely.
The ascendant, midheaven, descendant, and the IC. Yeah, okay.
We can't get much further than that if we want to go into forecasting, and absolutely.
Right, you can do sun sign, types of stuff, but forecasting, people paying a fee to come, they have something on their mind, and looking at the chart and what's activated, we astrologers can tell what it is.
Right.
Even if I have a client sitting there not saying anything.
You can just look and go, is this
the chart tells me what the issue is. We don't know the details. We don't know who said what to whom.
Right.
But we know the situation and what's the basis of the theme that's activated. But without a birth time, you can't really make accurate forecasts because the skies move, those angles move 1 degree every 4 minutes of clock time. And so if you're using, for instance, solar directions, 1 degree equals 1 year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm forecasting, oh, that's going to happen in 2024. And yet here it's happening now. And you go, well, whoops. You need birth time, accurate birth time.
And as you said before, not only do we have issues with countries where they have maybe no birth time at all, but even in maybe some Western countries, maybe round off to the half hour, to the quarter hour, or to the hour mark. So even then, that's not accurate enough if we want to get as close as possible.
And that, at least in the United States, that was very common up through the 1950s.
Absolutely.
To have rounded off birth time, because the doctor and the nurse, the medical team, they're worried about the care of the mother and the baby. What precise time? It looks like about 1 o'clock to me.
Yeah, they weren't thinking about astrologers at that point.
No, especially they don't care about astrologers. Mom might, but she's medicated.
Right.
So here you can see the red lines. And again, I have put this in whole sign. A lot of astrologers are now using whole sign format as the house system. But these angles that you see me pointing to here, you don't have those without an accurate birth time. And that's important information to interpret the chart and to forecast.
Yep.
So that said, historically, the first reference to birth time rectification is found clear in the 1st century of the Common Era, Ptolemy. Now, I will interject here. Modern astrologers, the joke is they call it rectification, W-R-E-C-T-I-F-I-C-A-T-I-O. Because a lot of people play around with it and don't know what they're doing. They can make a mess. But clearly, back in history, the sundial and later clocks, they weren't accurate to the minute until the late 17th century. So rectification just was, have fun. And it might hit the nail on the head, it might not. And then during up to the 19th century, between the church and the new scientific wave that dumped astrology out of the bus, it was clearly the 21st century that really this century we're in now is when, and we're on Zoom with Kepler, we have students all around the world, and they say, I don't have a birth time. So the issue, as I'm telling upcoming astrologers, you will have clients who will come to you. They want their chart read. They don't have a birth time.
Right. Absolutely.
And the other thing I do tell students in this 5-week course that's only, and indeed it's often, it could be offered 3 times a year, I think. But I tell those students, if you do a good rectification for some, so you're not going to make a bunch of money off of that, but I'll guarantee you will have a client for life.
Wonderful.
Because now you have a chart that you can forecast for them, and it works.
Absolutely. And I'm so very grateful they stick with you for the rest of the time.
Yeah. I mean, they can certainly see other astrologers, but getting that correct birth time makes a huge difference, because then looking at the past, the events, the major events that have happened line up at the right time with the appropriate astrological descriptors.
Absolutely.
And therefore, you can rely on forecasting going forward for that client because you have an accurate birth time.
Absolutely.
Now, this is what I show my students. I took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 astrologers, well-known astrologers who do rectification. And indeed, nobody agrees on how it's done. I align most with Bruce Schofield. He's teaches at Kepler also, great astrologer. And some of Noel Till, but they're all over the place. All of these 20 techniques I've listed there. Nobody agrees on all of them. There's, of the 10 people across, there aren't 10 people agree on anything.
Right.
Go to any astrology conference and yeah, same thing. Ask them what house system is the best. You'll get the same thing. Nobody will agree.
Exactly, right. And we're all independently minded. I think that's part of the issue as well.
You'd think they were all triple Geminis. The Rodden rating. Now, I worked with Lois Rodden. We were good friends. I used to always room with her at conferences, and Southern California, I would spend a lot of time with her. We were gathering in the early 1970s. We were gathering in her house, putting the birth data that she had jotted down, talking to famous people. She lived in Hollywood, and she was pretty well known then. And we would write down all that information on 3x5 cards. And, she wrote a couple of books and shared that information. And then once the internet came around, all of that data was digitized. And that was the foundation of what we now know as astro.com.
Right.
It was the Lois Rodden Astro Data Bank. And what she brought to our community was the importance of accurate data.
Absolutely.
And where did you get that data even? We now, in all of the articles and books that we write, have to give our sources. Before that, it wasn't done. And so here,
and there's such an important contribution to astrology. As you say, if anyone goes today and they go into astro.com, they're looking at charts. If they might not know these terminologies here, obviously the AA, that's the beacon. That's what we're really looking for. The AA, so the accurate data is recorded by the family or state. And once we get down to a bit of dirty data, we're getting in trouble there.
I'll tell you a little story about dirty data.
Okay.
Again, Lois loved her martinis before dinner. And at a conference, she was coming up with, I have AA, accurate data from the birth certificate, specific time. And then she says, I know A data, that's, a friend or a family member saying it. Biography, sometimes that's rounded on. There's no verification. Caution, no sort. She says, but I'm stuck on the bad data. I don't know what to do with that. Well, I think I had a martini with her at that time as well. And I suggested, well, what about dirty data? She said, got it.
I love it. Oh, wow. Wow.
That was one martini, probably more than I needed.
What a fantastic story. Wow. Amazing.
And then X, data with no time of birth. And then even you have people say, well, they're born right around 11:30 or, just after midnight. Well, I'm not sure the date exactly. You go, OMG. Yeah, that's hard work. But the accuracy of the data was brought to the forefront for all of us then. So most of my students in the beginning class use astro.com, and they use the information off of her 3x5 cards that we created.
Amazing.
Digitized.
Incredible.
So we've talked about the rounding off birth time and the accuracy, but indeed that's so important. Other chart factors are helpful, but really the moon moves 1 degree every 2 hours of clock time. So if you just have a rounded off birth time, it isn't going to change the moon. Yep. It might change the house that the moon is in.
Right. Yeah.
Makes a difference how you interpret it.
Huge difference, right?
Right. Yeah. So that's that brings up the issue. So the other issue that comes up if you're dealing with clients around the world and in Zoom, now we all use Zoom, and I have students and indeed clients all around the world. China, for instance, even now, when if you have a client in China, for instance, and they contact you through your website, and you have a Zoom meeting with them, and they give you their birth date and information through the lunar calendar. Totally different calendar than the one. It's a month later than the Western solar calendar that most of us use. So you have to ask questions. And here, Japan doesn't record birth time at all.
Absolutely.
So I send those people to the, maybe there's a baby book or a birth bracelet that, I make them do a little homework.
Absolutely.
The other time, the other issue, daylight savings time is a birth time nightmare.
Right.
I mean, just flying cross country in the United States and you to do a stopover in Phoenix in the middle of July, you go, God, what time is it? No, it can't be that. Oh, they're not on daylight. They're not on daylight savings time. There you go. Oh, got it. And so you get into California now, or
an astrologer's nightmare.
Oh yeah, and indeed, the worst offender is Illinois, because state law required all birth times to be recorded in standard time.
Oh, is that right? Oh, wow.
Yeah, even though they were on daylight savings time. This up until 1959, July 59. And then when wartime came, we had double daylight time. They wanted everything recorded on standard time to make it unified. So you go, oh my. And the problem is that would be okay to change, you change it by an hour into daylight savings, but the law was not always observed. So they might have been born in daylight savings time and the nurses recorded it down as it was.
Wow.
And Indiana gets second place. They have 345 time variations. Well, Illinois has more.
Oh, my days. Wow.
Yeah. So the problem that in Arizona as well as other states, part of the state is rural farming, and the animals get confused. Daylight savings time screws them all up in the feeding and the milking and all of that. So those parts of Indiana, for instance, don't do daylight savings time. And you get to the cities, the eastern part where it's more urban, does daylight savings time. So even within a state, so an astrologer's going,
So for anybody watching this, and if you're from any of these states, let us know in the comments if it would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, so these last 3 slides, I've talked about the pitfalls. And here's one example. Now, even there's controversy of Robin Williams. A Solar Fire, if you're using Solar Fire software, they give his birth Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But Astro.com, if you're looking up his chart in Astro.com, they give Chicago, Illinois. Now they're in the same time zone, so you say, oh, no problem. But here, if you're looking at doing the central daylight time that was used in Chicago, he has a 7 degrees Leo midheaven. But if you follow being born in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and using their no daylight savings time, it's 22 or 21:58.
And that's a huge difference, especially if we get to interpretation. Difference. Yeah, we've got, on the right-hand side, we've got that Mercury prominent there on the angle. But if we go left, we've got a few house movement places as here switching. So we're having to question what's going on.
Yeah. So to try to forecast for him, which chart are you going to use? Maybe you can test out each one. So that's double the work. I mean, it's just a nightmare. And that's partly why so many astrologers who are working to pay the house payment and put food on the table, it just takes so much time that you can't charge enough to pay for your, my students, will spend 2 weeks of their time trying to come up with the final presentation at the end of the class for a rectification.
Absolutely. And going back to your original point at the start, I mean, with the planets here, we're not having too many issues, but again, the angles, because we're moving so fast, and then the house positions, then that's where we're going to start having problems at this point.
Yeah. So the first thing you do is sort through the pitfalls and check off the list of see what's a pitfall, and okay, we got through that one. He hasn't, it's not in the lunar calendar, so we check that one off. And so forth. And then when you get down to, okay, here is the place, here is the time range that I'm working with, and then you can go to work specifically, but you get the the problematic stuff out of the way first before you start trying to rectify. Now, I tell students first, and I learned this from when I was 30 years old and I was going through a crisis of identity and feeling the family didn't appreciate me. I went to one of my friends said, "Carrie, you've got to go see an astrologer." Well, I pride myself and was proud of myself at the time. I just finished my master's degree, and I'm an academic. That's hooey, Well, I finally did go see an astrologer, and she didn't know anything about me. I didn't give her any information at all. I gave her my birth data. That's all. And what she did is, and now as an astrologer, I know what she did. She looked at my chart and she just simply used solar arc, mental math, started from my midheaven, and she counted the degrees between the midheaven to the moon. And she didn't say precisely, but when you were just 7.5 or so, was there some event where your mother was caring for you, and was there something that needed your care, that you couldn't do your normal stuff? And I said, yeah, I had my tonsils out. Yeah, mother took care of me.
You're being taken care for.
Yeah. Well, what she did was just simply using solar arc counting.
Right.
And then she asked a second question. She asked me a question of, was there some family issue that was difficult for the family to transition, or there's some issue that came up that was problematic in the family? And what she did is she counted from 13 degrees to 25 degrees opposite my Mars. That's all she did. And by asking that, Mars is in Capricorn in the 4th house. Yes, my family decided they were going to leave Ohio. And my father got a job in California, and it took him a few months to get enough money saved to pay down payment, rent, and utilities to bring the rest of us there. So there was that peak, and I will add, he had better opportunity in California because he had, did a little petty crime in Ohio. But that said, all she's doing is solar arc counting 1, 2, 3, 4 to the activation of the planet.
Amazing.
And then to make it to make sure that the chart worked. In other words, this is before any rectification. Test the chart to events and check to see if it works.
So she's seen the element of action taking place, house themes that are coming up, and she's putting the pieces together and asking you the questions. Yeah.
Yeah. She could have done something with the Ascendant as well, midheaven.
Yeah.
And so here she counted. I didn't know what she was doing at the time. Now I know. She counted from 13, so 17 degrees left of Cancer and 2 degrees of Leo. So when you were about 19 years old, was there a life-threatening situation that made a huge difference? And seeing here, look at the Saturn nodes.
Oh, wow.
So really from age 17 to 19. And I said, yes. I was married. I was still a senior in high school when I got married, still just almost 18, but 17. And we had a son, premature, and the son died when I was 19, just turned 19. So what I'm just saying, without doing any rectification at all, by testing, just asking some key questions of just moving the midheaven, could be the IC, it could be the Ascendant or Descendant. The midheaven is just, I think, easiest because the moon's there.
Right.
But I'm using my chart as an example to say, test it first, just using simple solar arc.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing those experiences. So you must have thought, after the astrologer was asking you questions, how on earth
did she know that? I'm the one with all the degrees. She didn't have any degrees.
Right. Wow.
And she did something that I said, I need to know how that lady did that.
Was so that for you, that was at a pivotal moment at that point in your realm into astrology? It must have been. Yeah.
And then when she got into the forecast, that gets into movement. I had Uranus transiting back and forth across my Ascendant. Well, that was exciting.
but next piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. In the consultation, she at the end talked about Uranus and what it means and so forth, and on the Ascendant and all that. And she leaned forward, looked me in the eye, and she said, "What have you done?" I go, "Oh."
And you knew automatically, you thought.
Absolutely. It was the mid-60s, for heaven's sakes. What can I say? But I'm just saying, this technique, before you even start a rectification, test what you have first to see if that chart works. And if it doesn't need to be rectified, great.
Perfect. Yep. Excellent.
Here's an example I want to share with everyone to make my point. Now, here I'm in astro.com, and indeed the official birth certificate for William has him born at 9. Well, I've got to move myself here so I can see. At 9:03 p.m. And that's an accurate time, birth certificate time, AA. I mean, why would you question it? Well, I'll make my case here. Here I have the planets, angles, arcing. I'm just using solar arc. Jupiter conjunct the midheaven, Neptune conjunct the Ascendant. In 1984, he was age 2. Okay. Born a future king. Age 8, Pluto conjunct midheaven, the parents part. In 1999, age 17, Saturn conjunct his midheaven, mom died. 2002, age 20 and a half, Mercury conjunct his descendant, he entered college. In 2005, age 23, Mars conjunct his midheaven, dad remarried. In 2008, age 26, Uranus conjuncted his ascendant, in love and soon married. In 2014, at age 32, Venus conjunct his descendant, first child born.
Fascinating.
And you think, okay, that's great. However, those things didn't happen in those years.
Oh.
Yeah,
it seemed, I was trying to wrap my brain around the dates, and I'm like, is that right? So, no, okay.
No, but look at the consistent pattern. Jupiter conjuncted his midheaven, Neptune conjunct his ascendant when he was born. born a future king. Okay. That was that event. In 1988, his parents parted when he was age 6, when Pluto conjuncted midheaven. It didn't happen when he was 8. It happened when he was 6.
Right.
In 1997.
And that's the big one, 1997.
Age 15. He was 15 when his mom died.
Mm.
Saturn conjunct the midheaven. In other
I
words,
remember
all
waking
the
my
way
grandmother
down the
up.
line, there's a 2-year difference.
Mm.
And again, 1 degree in solar arc is 1 year. So his 903 birth time is 2 degrees off.
Wow.
I mean, I could go out to finish, but they all match up in tandem. Now, the point is, since I have rectified this chart, and if I write an article, I have to put the Rodden rating of C, rectified. I can't use this in an article I might write about Prince William as AA data because I'm not using the 903.
Right.
But this time works. 8:55 p.m. works.
What a fantastic example of a rectified chart, because again, being such a public figure, you can actually go to the very dates of these public events happening. And again, it's just showing the power of rectification by a couple of minutes, how much that has changed. It's really quite powerful.
Yeah, and I'm just using a simple technique of solar arc directions. But that said, I if I write an article about Prince William, I'll use my rectified chart.
Wonderful example.
So now then, once you have decided that you're going to rectify, okay, the chart doesn't work. Now I'm going to get into testing it with 2 or 3 other techniques.
Right.
So during that conference that you have with the client, you're going to have to get the client to do some homework. So they're going to have to give you a dozen events, specific dates that span the lifetime, not just, particularly if you're dealing with famous people. Yeah, you know about their career in politics or their career in the movies, but you don't know age 0 to 25, for instance.
Right.
They leave that out.
Just only what's become public over the years, but maybe not the childhood or the early year development.
Yeah. So, and you want, and I hate to say it, I think the next slide probably says it. And I don't tell clients this, but the gut-wrenching, heartbreaking events are the easiest hooks to rectify by. Having a joyous trip, vacation to Hawaii, it doesn't give me,
because those traumatic events or things that happen, that it's so ingrained in one's mind, as you said, as opposed to maybe a wonderful trip where maybe quite Neptunian, where you don't really know the exact time or date, you just know it was a wonderful time and the feelings that gave you. But it's those shock moments, you'll remember the exact day and the
you
day.
will, guaranteed. I learned that when my husband passed away 5 years ago, and after 65 years, I've got, pictures galore and everything, but there weren't date stamps on them. And when I was preparing the slideshow for the church service, I couldn't even remember the specific dates. I could get them in the right decade.
Right.
That's the best I could do. I could get them in the right decade.
In the right decade.
And the way I did it is by hairstyles and the clothing. Oh, that's the 60s.
I've got my flares on. This is the 70s or whatever.
Yeah. And so, but the dramatic things like that, you remember that date specifically.
Absolutely.
And the time. So that's why, I don't want to scare people to death, but I develop a case theory. So here's a list of the types of things that are gut-wrenching, life-changing events. People move on, people grieve, they do what needs to be done and move on with life. But these are the indelible things.
Mm.
On the left-hand side, abuse of any sort, surgery, that's a specific thing. An event like cancer is a little bit harder because it's not a specific date. It's over time. So you as the astrologer have to pick and choose. So marriage may or may not be. And the reason I tell students marriage could be, in a world that we live in, marriage means very different things. In some societies, it's a business deal. It's not based on, or do you love each other? It's a business deal between the parental families.
Maybe arranged marriages in some places.
And then there's the other types of marriage that father had a shotgun and said, you will marry her. Yeah, marriage is not always the showers and all the gifts and all the parties and the cutting the cake.
Sure.
Around the world, marriage is, so you have to ask some questions.
Absolutely.
Which might determine which you choose. But nonetheless, you need information.
Absolutely.
Now, another thing that comes up, and again, our job is not ever to forecast we don't do death charts or stuff like that, because I have learned with 50 years as an astrologer, in many, many, many cases, the chart, looks difficult, but people have a will to live, and I don't know whether it's within the person that has that fight to get over, or if there's a God there saying, no, it's...
Absolutely. And of course, we've got ethical considerations at that point.
Because most of the time, people get through things. They put one foot in front of the other and get through things. Now, this is the chart of Patsy Cline. And indeed, this is an AA rated birth time, but 11:15, it looks rounded off to me. So in testing it and everything, first of all, looking at what's there, and I just, do things highlighted here to just make it easier to see. Here I have Uranus at 22, and I have Mars and Pluto at 23, square each other. Now, if you put those three bad boys in a room, you're going to have some problems in your life.
Right. Yeah, there's going to be a few.
When that is activated, a beginning astrologer should be able to see that.
Absolutely.
Now you don't go, oh, the sky's falling, your life's going to be miserable and so forth. Because look here, here's the moon, Cline, Jupiter, Neptune, beautiful singer, wonderful public persona, all of these. But when this group of bad boys gets activated, something's going to happen. You not only have one planet getting activated, you're going to get two others pretty much at the same time.
Right.
So
time to prepare.
I have a dialogue with questions and ask, is there abuse or anything going on? You need more information to get right here.
Yep.
But I know as an astrologer that here, using solar arc direction, I just did the bi-wheel, and look at this, 1963. She died in an airplane accident. Wow. But using the solar arc, here's Saturn on the midheaven, arced to the midheaven, and the ascendant has arced to conjunct the Mars Pluto, square the Uranus.
Wow.
Am I surprised?
Right.
Now, she might have survived the airplane crash and had broken arms and legs and recuperated and so forth. I mean, that does happen. So, but I'm just saying, when you see a natal chart with strong, tight, close 1 degree aspects, you know that when they are activated, they come as a team.
Right.
So I'm just saying, you have to consider the natal chart.
And that's a wonderful example, because the rectification there was only by 6 minutes, I believe. So they had the 1:15, and then you rectify down to 1109. So
well, 1109.
Just showing how, 6 minutes. I mean, people might not think 6 minutes is anything, but wow, in this particular case, in this example, this is quite an incredible example.
Yeah. So, again, you don't go, oh, Chicken Little, sky's falling. When you see hard aspects in a chart, you try to find the nuance, and I tell clients that certain times when I'm seeing things being activated that could be dangerous, I just don't do crazy stuff.
Right.
Don't be walking through a dark alley by yourself.
Sure.
Smart.
Yeah.
So here's a sample of just the, this is Joe Biden's chart, but the thing I want to point out, birth time resources. I make the student or the client do homework, talk to the relatives, the maybe aunt who was at mother's side when the child was born, the birth announcement or the band on the baby's, mothers save those things.
Yeah.
Local newspapers, baptism records, baby book entries. So I make them do the homework before, as they're preparing this list for me. And indeed, this list on Joe Biden, I have nothing before age 30.
Right.
I'd say, okay, Joe, back to the drawing board. I want some more events.
Right. Absolutely.
They might be in the garage next to the Corvette.
Oh, right.
Oh, gosh. So this is a client that I've had. The point of this slide is that important dramatic events early in life really jump out. Here's a client broke her arm very badly at age 2, and a couple months later, her father suddenly died of pneumonia.
Wow.
So early on, I mean, a parent dying when a child is very little is much more dramatic than dad dying when he's 95 and you're 70.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, certainly we would be sad, but it's not as traumatic. So those early events
have a profound effect on the client.
Absolutely. And again, just doing solar arc, just eyeballing. Here's the midheaven for that birth time, 6:45 a.m. And so here it's 3 degrees away. Here's the ascendant to Saturn, descriptive of father passing. Even the ascendant to the sun could be the father. Saturn, sun are in Scorpio. So I am figuring that, there's going to be a change of a little bit to say at early 2 and just 2 months later. So early 2s, I'm going to have to adjust a little bit. So I adjusted it from 6:45 to 49. So one degree, and now it lines up.
Right.
And then it matches all of the other events in sequence.
Right. So once you've honed in on one, the others start to fall in line.
Yeah. So again, you're going to spend some time, but as I always teach students, start with the solar arc. Pick the low-hanging fruit first. Secondary progressions, well, everything's moving in its own direction and how fast it.
Right.
Transit's the same way.
Yeah.
They're all moving all over the place in their own way. Solar arc is the easiest tool to start with.
Grab that first.
So basically, I'm at the end here, but I teach, look at the natal chart and find the closest 1 degree aspect hooks, planets that are within 1 degree of conjunct, opposition, square, sextile, trine, quincunx, whatever. Maybe 2 degrees if you don't have any 1 degree orbs.
And that's an important point when you're talking about orbs, is being as tight as possible and trying to hone in using these techniques.
Yeah. So those are aspect hooks.
Hmm.
And then the other tool I use, you're matching up aspect hooks with event hooks, the day or month and year of major life events.
Hmm.
And if you get those to line up, even the little events fall into place. I've said this already. So really, rectification is an advanced class.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 5-week class. However, I'm leading into there is a second class that is another 5 weeks. And the W112B class deals with the 12-hour to 24-hour search. In other words, if somebody comes to me and doesn't know their time at all, I have students in this class who have clients or relatives who don't know the birth time even within a rounded off time.
Wow. Wow.
Whereas the first 5 weeks of 112A deals with birth times within a range of 6 hours.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
So it's the same tool. No new tools are taught.
Sure, sure.
It's using
now we're just
the
dealing with a
tools you
different set
know.
of circumstances and a lot wider time frame. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
So talking about the class, when is the next one coming up? So have we got
in the beginning of spring term.
Spring term. So for everybody watching this video, I will have a link in the video in the description to that course. And if you click on that, that'll take you to the Kepler website if you would like to sign up and be with Kepler in the spring term.
Yeah. But again, if there are people watching who are astrologers and want some more information on rectification, even if you don't take the class, you can go into the Kepler store, and I believe the price is $25 to get the latest version in digital format.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'll put a link in the description to that one as well. Wonderful.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So really, welcome to rectification. See this gray hair? That's what happens to you.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. Again, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. And again, the details and the depth you go into and the examples are they blow my mind, and how much work and research you've done over the years and put these together. Again, that's why I said you are one of my favorite astrologers. So I'm very thankful you've come and to share your knowledge and wisdom with us today. And thank you again so much. So just to reiterate for everybody watching, again, we'll put the link of the class links in the video in the description, also the link to the downloadable version of what Carol's just been speaking to. And again, we'll have those and in pop-ups as well. So again, thank you so much, Carol, for sharing with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.